Let's close things out with the Pittsburgh Penguins and specifically about one of their younger players in Rutger McGroarty. I think it's fair to say that Rutger's time with the Penguins organization hasn't quite gone to plan. When that trade went down a couple off seasons ago and the Penguins traded away the then number one and surefire top prospect in Braden Yeager, the narrative around the deal was, well, they brought over Rutger McGroarty because he was closer to being ready for the NHL. And that still might be the case because it doesn't seem like Braden Yeager is quite ready to make that jump. But I think once you're 3 years beyond the trade, once you're entering the third season of Rutger McGroarty, that you've kind of lost that aspect of the deal. We all kind of recognized the second he stepped on the ice that the skating just wasn't ready to play at the highest level. He made the team out of camp and got the opportunity to play in the first handful of games, but everybody realized that it wasn't clicking. It did not look like he was quite ready. So he gets sent down to the AHL. He builds up throughout that season. He gets an opportunity late in that season because the Penguins were far out of a playoff spot at that point, and he looks much better. Unfortunately, during that cup of coffee at the NHL level late in the season, he gets injured. He suffers a lower body injury, and it costs him the Calder Cup playoffs, something that Kyle Dubas has stated time and time again is an important time of year for them to evaluate these young players, and is an important time of year for these young players to grow, to gain experience, and to develop in a high-stakes environment. Rutger McGroarty lost that after his first year in the Penguins organization. And then he comes back for year two, and he has more of the same injuries and more competition in the Penguins roster because they went from a team that was far out of the playoffs, finishing in the bottom 10 in the NHL, a lottery team, to a playoff team in an instant. And a big reason was because they brought in and hit on a lot of, for lack of a better term, dart throws last offseason. But it didn't help for Rutger McGroarty that he missed all of training camp due to an upper body injury, so he already lost out on his spot because he wasn't healthy. And then he comes back, plays a little bit at the NHL level, looks like he's playing at a higher level than he did in year one, but he gets injured again in practice when he suffers a concussion. At that point of the season, the replacements were too good to remove from the lineup, and he gets sent back down to the American Hockey League, where he spent the remainder of the season. Then comes the Calder Cup run. 4 goals, 9 points in 15 games. He wasn't the Penguins' leader in points during the Calder Cup run. He wasn't their leader in goals because it was more of a collective effort offensively for the baby Penguins. But he had a very, very impressive postseason where, of anyone, Rutger McGroarty stepped up in the biggest and brightest moments. He had probably the most memorable moments of that entire postseason run. An OT winner against the Hershey Bears that was huge in that series, and then an even bigger goal in Game 4 of the conference finals against Toronto to tie the series at 2. Remember, Wilkes-Barre went down 2-0 after losing both games at home. He was able to score with about 3 minutes left to get Wilkes-Barre even in that series before they eventually fell in 6 games. But he showed that ability to score when the lights are brightest. He showed a much improved skating ability, and he showed that really he is ready to jump to that next level, in my opinion. Now, again, while I am bullish on Rutger McGroarty, the Penguins are not just going to hand it to him going into next season. They're going to have to make him earn it, because you look at the roster right now, and this is a conversation that we have constantly at this point because, well, it's kind of ridiculous how many NHL level, NHL caliber forwards that the Penguins have. The entire top 6 from last year is back as of this moment. They brought in some new faces that you'd have to imagine are going to be in the plans to make the opening night roster in Andrei Kuzmenko and Nicholas Robertson. Then you have two players that were on the playoff roster last year and played in that series against the Flyers in Elmer Soderblom, Justin Brazeau, Connor Dewar. Not only that, he's contending with fellow kids in Avery Hayes and Tristan Brose and Bill Zonin and so on and so on. Then you add on the fact that Philip Hollander is still around. There's a lot of players gunning for NHL roster spots. But I'm confident in Rutger McGroarty. And I've said this in seasons past, and I was confident in Rutger McGroarty going into last year. And then you learn that he's injured. And that, to me, is one of the biggest things that hampered him in year 2 from breaking out and becoming an everyday NHLer, is that he couldn't stay healthy. And when he was out of the lineup, the people that replaced him played too well to be removed. I'm confident that this is going to be the year that Rutger McGroarty breaks through. If he can stay healthy, of course. That is the caveat. You have to stay healthy to be able to stay consistently at the NHL level, because it feels like the Penguins have so many options that if you go down with injury, the same thing that happened last year is going to happen this year. The person that takes your place is probably going to play pretty good, and it's going to make it harder for Kyle Dubas and Dan Hughes and Nick Bonino to insert you into the lineup while taking out somebody that's been as good as they have been. But when I look at McGroarty, I see so many improvements on the skating. I think that is the biggest factor. That was the biggest reason in year 1 that it felt like he wasn't quite ready, is the skating. He has done so much work at that particular area of the game that, to me, it's always going to be a factor. But as of right now, I'm not concerned about that holding him back from making the team and sticking at the NHL level. If anything, I'd be concerned about where his ceiling is at because of it, but not that he isn't an NHLer. I think that ship has sailed, considering the way he's played and the way he's improved in that area. His ability to play all special teams, I think, is going to help him in a big way. I mean, Elmer Soderblom didn't kill penalties. Justin Brazeau, if I'm not mistaken, didn't really kill penalties. So McGroarty having that tool in his belt is going to help him get opportunities here this season. And I think we need to identify what breaking out looks like for Rutger McGroarty. Yeah, it'd be great if he broke out the way Anthony Mantha did last year. It'd be great if he broke out the way that Igor Chinikov did last year, but I don't think that's the expectation that we should be having of Rutger McGroarty. I think breaking out for Rutger McGroarty in 2026 is making the team out of camp. He's done it before. He can do it again. Becoming a fixture in the Penguins' middle six. So whether that be the third line with Ben Kindle or finding a way up to the second line some way, somehow. I don't know what that would look like. Maybe somebody gets injured. Maybe somebody falters early in the season and they want to put Malkin back at center and add a winger to that line. However it looks, Rutger McGroarty becomes a fixture night in and night out in the middle six. And I think if you're looking for counting stats, what I would consider a breakout for Rutger McGroarty is 15 plus goals and 40 plus points. If we see that from Rutger McGroarty, I think it will have been a very successful season. I would think it would be considered, in my opinion, a breakout season for Rutger McGroarty. And I think that's possible. I think that we could be sitting here a year from now, and he could be a guy that you don't write in with pencil in the Penguins' projected lineup for 2027-28. I think he's a guy that you would write in pen as a member of that lineup going into that season. So I'm bullish on Rutger McGroarty. I have been for some time, but going into this season, I think he has a lot more of the boxes checked than he has in any other year prior.